I've known today's guest for a number of years now through networking circles originally, and I'm pleased to say that we've become friends over time. Now, I've wanted to have her on the podcast for a long time, but interestingly, only about a month ago, I decided to work with her myself. Things in my business and life, they weren't bad, but they also weren't quite where I wanted them to be. And I knew enough to know that if nothing changes, nothing changes. So I reached out to her. And what surprised me was how quickly things started shifting. And this wasn't because we had suddenly created a completely different business overnight, but because we started looking at things I already knew were there, patterns, beliefs, things sitting in the background that I hadn't quite fully seen or addressed, or I hadn't been able to put my finger on it, or perhaps I didn't want to see them. And when we started working together, within days, I felt different. I even sounded different. A friend of mine said something like I sounded like the old Beck again. And in my business, inquiries started increasing, bookings picked up, and things began flowing in a way that they hadn't for a while. And it reminded me of one of the very reasons I do what I do and why I believe in it so deeply, is that sometimes we are simply too close to our own stuff to see it clearly. So when we started talking about doing this episode, I realized this conversation around settling, value, and the stories that people tell themselves about what's possible wasn't just an interesting thing for us to talk about. It felt like a really necessary conversation to have and to share with you. So today's guest on the Brain Changers podcast is strategic business alignment coach, personal development mentor, podcast host in her own right, and creator of Business Alchemy, Toni Everard. Welcome to The Brain Changers, a podcast about learning how to revolutionize the way you think and live by mastering your mind. We're your hosts, mother and daughter duo, Rebekah and Yvonne King from Moonbeam Monday. Our goal is to empower you to live the life you choose by teaching you how to retrain your brain. Some people tell us it sounds like mind control, and it is, but not the way you might think. This is about you taking control of your own mind rather than letting your mind control you, so you can choose to live a life free from the expectations of others. No matter what you've experienced in the past, you can create positive change and transformation by learning how to master your mind. We know this because we've done it. Between us, we've survived cancer and stroke and eliminated debilitating anxiety and depression. We've turned our pain into purpose through the power of our mind, and we're now here to support and guide you to do the same. In this podcast, we share valuable insights about how your brain works, why you think, say, and do the things you do, how to begin the process of change, and why it's necessary. Because we know that when you change your mind, you change your life. Thanks for joining us. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to the Brain Changers podcast. I am Rebekah King, and as you heard in the intro, I'm pretty excited about today's guest. Toni Everard is someone that people in Adelaide know as really the go-to person in NLP coaching and training, and well, that really only scratches the surface. There is much more to Toni than just that. But what I can tell you about her is that she has a real knack for getting to the heart of what is actually going on underneath the surface and helping people make changes in their life that yield incredible results, both personally and professionally. So, Toni, welcome to the Brain Changers podcast.
Hey, thanks, Beck. That was a beautiful intro and great to be here.
Awesome. And yes, I think you had me on your podcast, The Coaching Circle, a couple of years ago now. So I've been really wanting to return the favor and have you on the Brain Changers and pick your brain, because you are a font of knowledge when it comes to the brain and what is happening and why we do things. And one of the reasons that this conversation felt so timely is because in the last few months, not only through my own experiences and through but through conversations, and I think in particular one that you and I were having when we started talking about recording this, is I've been noticing a bit of a pattern in what people are saying lately. Things like, I should be just grateful that I have a job right now, or if I want to make changes, now probably isn't the time. I don't want to risk losing what I've got. And I get that. The world's in a state of flux at the moment. It's a little bit crazy, perhaps a little bit crazier than usual. And a lot of people are feeling uncertain. But the more I listen, the more I wonder if underneath all of that, there is a belief sitting there of something like, maybe this is as good as it gets. And I think that was actually your term. You said this is something that you're hearing. So do you think that that's what's going on? And do you think this belief is more common than people realize?
Yeah, look, I think this is a really great conversation, and we're seeing it even more, especially with the recent, budget announcements. And I think what happens is people get this sense that creating what they actually want just seems out of reach. Like there's always something outside of themselves that's really controlling whether they can get what they want or not. And I know I've definitely been there. Like that was a big thing for a lot of my life, is that I always had this feeling that I could never really have what it was that I wanted. And when we have that feeling, of course, there's going to be so many things that show up. And even like I love all things property and really looking at investing and those kinds of things. And because now there's all these proposed changes around negative gearing and, capital gains and all those kinds of things. And, I was having a conversation with someone the other day who's actually a broker going, no one's going to be, putting a halt on the market. But I said, the thing is, though, there are still going to be people who are still going to create what they want, because whatever the rules are, or whatever seems to be going on outside, there's always going to be a way that you can work around that to create what you actually want. But that's not the normal way of thinking in society. That's not the normal conversations that we have. So yeah, I think there is that undercurrent that's, sitting there of, I can't have what I really want.
Yeah. So, okay. So where does that come from? Why aren't we having these conversations?
Yeah. This is the
question, right?
I just jump straight into this stuff, Beck. And, my strong belief is that, and you would know this anyway from the work that you've done and the work you do with your clients as well, is that we are all so influenced by our emotions.
Yeah.
And how we feel. And of course, what the meaning that we create about things is always linked to emotions. And it's so many people are driven by those emotions or those sensations in their body. So if it feels, a bit tense or uncomfortable, then, it's like danger, there's the fear, or there's the, I can't move past this. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting because I do a lot of work with people around their childhood experiences, because this is where obviously a lot of things get formed. And, one of the things that I've really come to notice is how much emotional neglect happens in our society. So despite the fact that our emotions influence so much of what we do, there's this whole kind of missing piece in parenting often, especially there was, I know definitely back in the 60s, 70s and 80s and into the 90s there was, where people were like, no, well, I had a really good childhood because, we always had things, we, had a nice house, I could do sports, I could do whatever. But they're not even aware that there was an amount of emotional neglect that happened. And so why this is really important is that if we don't feel like it's safe to fully feel our emotions or to fully feel positive emotions, then when we think about achieving things that we really want or having things that we really want, the only reason we think about having them is because of how we think it's going to make us feel. But if you don't fully believe that you can feel that way and feel safe in feeling that way, then you're never going to actually create that in your life, right? And so instead, we'll be like, oh, well, there's all these other reasons external about why I can't have what I want. When really, it's just we haven't been able to learn to give ourselves permission to actually have what we want and have those feelings that go with it, because it's a sense of being very powerful, right? When you know that you can create what you want and you can experience the ease and the fun and the joy and the, expansiveness. If you haven't been taught that that's okay as a child, then you won't experience that as an adult. It will be very difficult. And I honestly believe that this, bring it back around to childhood, is that we've often come from these environments where it's like, children should be seen and not heard, right? Or some kind of effect like that. And so, but we think about how powerful our emotions, right? And for a child that's very happy and excited and confident and, having a zest for life is a lot harder to control than a child that is feeling a little bit worried about if they're going to be in trouble or if they're in fear or if they're sad or if, all of those kind of negative emotions. And so this is the pattern that keeps showing up. And it's that, okay, if I'm feeling too many of these good positive emotions, I might be at risk of upsetting somebody.
Yeah.
Right? And then that's where it turns into, oh no, it's actually, there's all these other things that are stopping me, rather than really acknowledging that it just doesn't feel safe for me to go after what I want.
So much gold in there. So, and jumping straight into it, I love that. So, you're talking about childhood experiences, and I'm putting myself in the shoes perhaps of our listeners, going, so what, you're saying that everything that I'm feeling or doing or saying now is because of something that happened a long, long time ago. I don't think that's quite right. Like, I've left that behind. So how do you respond to somebody who perhaps comes to you or questions you about this? They think they've dealt with a lot of stuff, and I'm going to put myself in this category as well. We all do a lot of work on ourselves, or perhaps we have therapy, we talk about things, and we think we've dealt with it. But so what's actually going on? Because we haven't, have we? We're still holding on to these things. We're still feeling unsafe. Why are the things that we've tried before not working?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I was the same as you, Beck. Like I had spent years working on things, and it's not to say that they hadn't worked. They had worked. I'd made lots of headway. I'd made lots of progress, but there was still this sticky thing that was sitting there, right? And for me, that sticky thing for a long time in business was around, I knew there was something for me around men and money, and I could not pinpoint it. I could not put my finger on it. I just knew it was there, and I couldn't logic it away. It was something underlying. And the key thing of why this shows up is that often the thing that we really need to shift or we really need to face is a truth that will completely shift our perception of often our childhood or our parents or what we have felt safe believing is true. And so for me, I had to get really real about the how emotionally avoidant my dad was. And I'd grown up believing that my dad was my hero, right? That he was my hero in a lot of ways, and he was in a lot of ways. But when I had to get really, like, I was so determined to resolve what this thing was in me, because, it made all the difference for how much that I could achieve and enjoy my life as well. But I had to be able to face the fact that, my dad wasn't actually the perfect man. He was just a man. And, often we go through different sorts of experiences as children where we for our sense of survival, we identify with, either one or both of our parents as being good, as being, the good one, or the one that was most important, but it's often the one that was the most important for our survival. And so for a child, you're not going to want to make any waves or see anything different about the person there that you rely on for your survival. And so, so often I hear this and people say, no, I had a great childhood. And it's not to say that you didn't have a great childhood or that there weren't really great things that happened in your childhood. But when I ask the questions and go deeper, what I actually find is that, there were actually experiences where one or the other parent just wasn't around, right? Maybe they worked away, or they worked a whole lot, or that, one or the other parent had some kind of, struggles with mental health, or maybe they drank, or maybe they had a temper, or, these things that were just accepted as how things were at the time. But for a young child, it means that there's a real deficit in how much emotional support that they're getting at that time. And these are the things that often go unnoticed, but where we see them, coming out, and especially for me and my clients, is often I see these patterns really starting to hit home when people are in their sort of mid-30s and mid-30s to mid-40s, definitely for people. Mm-hmm. And I notice those especially with men who whose careers have grown, they've got kids, mortgages, family, all that kind of stuff, and all the pressure starts building up. Mm-hmm. And that's when the cracks start to show. So the things that, they could kind of skim over before just aren't able to be skimmed over anymore. And
it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, the perceived small thing that is just the last straw.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for, a lot of the other women that I work with are usually, around 50 and over, where they're going into business for themselves. Because, I was having a conversation about this yesterday actually, with a community that I'm in, where a lot of people around that, coming towards that 50 years old, want to create some changes in their life. So they might be changing careers, starting a business, doing something else. And then that whole shift requires them to get really honest about what, is underlying that's never been resolved. So I think the thing is that even if you weren't aware of anything, things that you've got that are fused to your identity, so where you feel like this is just me or this is just how I've been, will pretty much always stem back to childhood, because that's where the basis of our identity, really gets the foundations laid.
That's right. And I think this is a really good, I want to just go over a couple of the things that you said there, because it's really important to reiterate this. We could have had what we thought of as a really great childhood. Like, we all have comparisonitis, right? So we go, oh, my childhood was fantastic. Like, it could have been worse. Think of somebody who didn't have a parent or a nice upbringing or go to a good school or have everything they need. Mm-hmm. But it's all relative to our particular situation. And there is, all of those survival skills and safety and having a roof over your head and clothes to wear and education, they're all important. But emotional safety is paramount to helping us be able to function in life as an adult. And so, and I can relate to what you're saying. And obviously, I think I said at the beginning, we have been working together because, like you said, we've done a lot of work. There's been the therapy, the counseling, the coaching, all of that. But you don't just go, oh, bang, I've dealt with it all and everything is hunky-dory now. It's like you keep taking another layer and another layer. So I can very much say I'm one of those people that said, I had a terrific childhood. I was very well looked after. I had a great education. I had great parents. But when we start digging, I realize all of those things you were just talking about. My parents were wonderful people, are wonderful people. My mum is still alive. My dad died when I was young, when I was 16. And even in those 16 years, I can see how emotionally avoidant he was, how he wasn't around a lot. And perhaps I had idolized him a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. I was a kid, I was a teenager, but I have seen it play out in so many different ways in life. And one thing that just came up when you were talking, I'm wondering if this is something we do. Can we get that emotional, what's the word I'm looking for? Support from one parent and not so much another, and it still becomes an issue?
Yeah,
do we need it from both?
Well, look, I mean, ultimately, what we need, because when we think about as children and we're born, and we have parents, and ultimately our parents, when a baby's born, when you have a newborn baby and you look at the baby and it's like, oh, this baby is deserving of all the love and guidance and support and safety and being valued and, being introduced to the world of, as someone of value and having all the opportunities and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And no one can deny that. You don't never see a baby and you go, yeah, this one's probably not set up for much, right?
No, we'll never do that.
But ultimately then, what happens in the perfect world, which obviously the perfect world doesn't exist, is that parents are emotionally available to be able to provide all of the baby's needs. So not just, physical, survival needs, but also those emotional needs as well, and to really help and guide them and guide their behavior and help them understand their emotions and process their emotions and all those kinds of things. But the purpose of the parents doing that isn't just to do it for them, but to teach the child to be able to do that for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that doesn't happen, then, there's the masculine and the feminine. So ultimately when a baby's born, the first sort of 18 months is really around the love and connection and nurturing with the mother. And then after that time, then it's where the masculine or the father steps in, where it really shows them the value and shows them to the world and those kinds of things. So our relationship with mother or the feminine usually is mostly related to our inner world and the love and things that we feel for ourselves. And then the relationship we have with the masculine or the father figure is a lot to do with our value and how the world sees us. And so it's, if we have a parent that's missing, it just depends on who else is in the environment, right? In your sort of family, extended family, your circle. And it's really making sure that there is that good, healthy balance of both the masculine and the feminine. Now, I think it's not that I don't think single parents do a good job. I think, single parent, I've been a single parent before, and, it's a lot, and you do really try your best. But, I know as well that it's important that you still have those other supports around, those other influences, which I think is healthy anyway, right? It's for children to see other masculine examples and other feminine examples. And you think about where we came from when we were in tribes and clans and, villages and things like that. Of course, there was always more people around. So, I think that these days there's a lot more isolation, and that puts a lot more pressure on parents and children. And there's not ultimately a perfect way to do it, but really looking for, are these particular needs getting met?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And that's where that saying, it takes a village, comes from, right? Is because we have different influences, in the, like you said, in the tribes or how we used to live, how we started out. There was the wise woman and the doctor, the witch doctor, and you went to different people, you had different influences in your life, and so we perhaps have lost a lot of that as we've evolved. I'm sitting here thinking, for somebody who is really interested in doing some of this work, it's easy to think, well, let me use my own situation as an example. It can feel really hard to start diving into this when you perhaps think, but I don't want to blame my parents for everything. And I think we want to be very clear here. This is not about blaming anyone. This is certainly about taking responsibility for the kind of life that we want to lead, the kind of person that we want to be, and addressing any wounds that have been created along the way. But in my experience, as I said, like my dad died when I was 16. So there might be that feeling of, well, I don't want to tarnish the way that, you know, the good that he did bring to the world, or the good childhood that I did have, or his memory of what I have with him. So how do we actually start taking steps to address this without feeling like we're crapping all over something, to put it quite crudely?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Beck, and it's a really important thing that I really spend a lot of time with my clients, getting them to understand the basis of what this is, because as an adult, it's, you know, your responsibility to manage your own emotional state and well-being and health and all those kinds of things. And it's really important that we also recognize it's also your parents' responsibility to manage their own emotional state and responsibilities and everything else. But the really important thing about this work is the ability to recognize the difference between what you deserve to receive as a child and what your parents had capacity for. Because if we're still fused with, well, my parents were good people, so, you know, they did nothing wrong, then essentially what we do is we abandon our own experience in childhood, our own emotional experience, to protect the feelings of other people. And that is not taking responsibility for your own growth. And there's two parts to this, right? When we abandon ourselves to protect someone else, we also rob the other person of their own growth and their own impact on people. But the other part of it is you don't necessarily even have to talk to your parents about this. Right? They don't have to know. It doesn't have to be like a massive intervention where you go, it doesn't have to be any intervention. You don't have to go to your parents and say, hey, you know what, this is what you did when I was a child, and I've suffered for the last 30 years because of it.
Yeah, it's not actually about them, is it?
It's not about them at all, right? Because, you know, what I was saying before around is our parents, you know, ideally when we're little, they provide all of this so that we can learn how to do it for ourselves. If they didn't, then as an adult, we still got to learn how to do it for ourselves. And the only way we can do that is by recognizing what we actually deserve to start with, so that we can start giving it to ourselves, and we can essentially take our parents off the hook of what it is that we think they did or didn't do for us, right? Because that's what makes you like resourced within yourself. And that then affects every relationship that you have, because if you know that you can create the feeling of love and safety and belonging and connection because you know it in yourself and it feels safe for you to do so, then you can do that in every area of your life, wherever you choose to do it. And it's not reliant on your parents. And I think this is the big thing. And, you know, interestingly, I was talking to a grief coach the other night, you know, but you were sort of mentioning about how your dad passed, and often that's a big thing around grief with people that hold on to grief, is what's unresolved with the person who's passed. And, you know, that we can, you know, really hold someone in that sort of space of like, oh, I could never, ever say anything bad about them, or even, you know, paint them in any kind of picture that's not idyllic. But all of that comes back to, again, it's like you have to abandon yourself to do that. And so it's the whole purpose of this is to stop abandoning yourself and recognize your own needs, and it's the unmet needs that we have that continue to create all of the problems in our life. So when we can, really focus on ourselves, stop abandoning our own needs and start meeting those needs for ourselves, then it becomes even less about what your parents did or didn't do.
Wise words. You can see why I said that Toni is really good at really quickly going below the surface and actually getting to the crux of the issue here. But what I want to ask you, Toni, is most people won't do this deep dive straight away. Like, it takes courage to go here, right? We need to first be aware of it, which is what I hope this conversation is allowing for a lot of people. We need to be aware of it. We need to acknowledge that all of us have some of this to varying degrees to perhaps address. But I would kind of like to go to the surface a little bit, just for people who are perhaps going, well, how does this show up in life? And we started talking about at the very beginning sort of how people are going, maybe this is as good as it gets. Maybe I should stay in this job right now. Maybe I shouldn't rock the boat. And so I know you work with a lot of successful people, capable, often very experienced. And others could even look at their lives going, well, they're intelligent, they've got it all going for them, they could do anything. And yet we still see people staying in situations, I guess, that they've clearly outgrown, jobs that are draining them, or businesses that no longer fit who they're becoming, roles that don't excite them, all of those types of things. So if we're looking at it from that level, why is it that smart, intelligent, capable people stay in situations that they have outgrown?
Fear.
No, take a moment. Fear. Okay, can you explain that a little bit to us? What is it fear of?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we think about whatever situation we're in, it's always within the bounds of what our identity says is okay. And your identity will die to be right? It will die to be right in knowing and understanding how things are and how the world is. And so if you start getting, and the conflict occurs is because as humans by nature, we are always looking for growth and contribution. We're designed to always seek more. It's also, what the undercurrent of addiction is that we're always, going to be seeking more. But in life as well, we always tend to seek more. So it's that growth and being able to contribute to something that's greater than ourselves. And so if we're already in an identity that says, this is who I am and this is what I do, and everybody around me knows that this is who I am and this is what I do, and everything seems right in the world if I keep doing this, even if I start feeling like, yeah, but I don't know that this is what I want to keep doing. Maybe there's more out there for me. Maybe there's something else that I want to experience. Then the nervous system goes, yeah, but you're talking about uncharted territory. You're talking about things that people don't see you as. You're talking about things that you're not quite sure exactly how that would work out. And so, of course, that then starts bringing tension and conflict and all those kinds of things. And so it, like you said, it does take a lot of courage. And, I can share an example that I had of this for myself. I've been in business for over 10 years now, and for the first 8 years of those, I was, as you mentioned at the start of this, I was known as the NLP trainer. Mm-hmm. And so I did all of the NLP training. I was teaching NLP for, like I said, 8 years. I was running trainings, like 7, 8, 9 trainings a year. Like most of them would go for 7 days straight. And that's what I was known as. But then it came to a point where I started thinking, I don't know if I still want to be in the training room doing this same thing. I know this inside out. I know NLP so well that, I can teach it with my eyes shut, and yeah, people get really great results. But I feel like there's something more for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, but there was fear there, right? Because I'm like, well, my whole business is based on that I'm the NLP trainer, right? Everybody knows me as that. So what'll happen? But I was just feeling like I was starting to resent the commitment to those trainings. And I thought, this isn't how I want to show up, because people are paying for me, to be there and do that. I want to make sure that I'm doing it in the best, most authentic way, to be fair and really respect the people that were coming in. And so I thought, no, it's something I need to change. And I started whispering it to people. I catch up with someone, they'd say, oh, how's everything going? How's business? And I go, oh yeah, look, it's pretty good. But I'm like, oh, just quietly, just between you and I'm thinking I'm going to stop teaching NLP. And
see what their reaction was.
See what their reaction was. And they go, oh, wow, well, good on you. And I was like, wow, nobody's freaked out. No one's like, nothing bad's happened.
Yeah.
And so then eventually I did make the announcement. I'm like, this will be my last NLP training. I won't be doing this anymore. I did have one of my clients cry about it. So, that was pretty much the worst thing that happened. Other than that, everybody fully celebrated it and, really supported that change. But I had to be willing to face that and see that and not abandon myself for the sake of what did everybody else think or what did everybody else expect. And I think that is the key thing that still comes back to that, that childhood wounding, that we learn to abandon ourselves to keep everybody else happy or to fit in with what is expected or what people know how to deal with. And so it's creating that strength within yourself that you can say, no, I'm going to do this because it's good for me, because this is what I want to do. And I trust myself that this isn't hurting anybody else, that it's okay for me to try something, that I'll be able to work it out as I go along, like that there will never be one final decision. I'm going to forever get feedback and I can just make new decisions and take new paths and that things will work out. And that's when we stop abandoning ourselves, we start trusting ourselves to be able to do that. And, that's when things change.
Yes. And just something that you said there, I can't even remember exactly what it was, but that word that you and I probably are quite similar on this, that we really don't like, that perfectionist. We hear that from a lot of people now. I don't know about you. I don't think I've ever heard you say that word or that you're a perfectionist. I don't believe you would feel or think that way. No. I certainly don't. Not that I was always like that, but I think a lot of people get stuck in that label. Right. We love a label, don't we? And something you were just saying there, you were talking about not abandoning ourselves, being okay with that we won't get it right or always right, especially as we go. I mean, you've been in business over 10 years now. I'm sure that sometimes you still make mistakes or still do things where you think, that didn't quite work out the way that I thought it would. I better adjust here.
Yeah.
And I know I certainly do as well. So, but a lot of people that clearly haven't perhaps addressed this, what we've been talking about this whole time, this safety, this not abandoning ourselves, they get stuck in this, but I've got to have all my ducks in a row before I jump into that. And so perhaps what I'm hearing there is that you have learned over time to really value yourself, what you are capable of, what you bring to the table, but you also value what you're doing internally for yourself, like your growth. So
yeah,
I think perhaps on the flip side there is that a lot of people underestimate the value of what they actually can bring to the table. Like I've spoken with a lot of people who, again, bright, intelligent, capable people. They've got years of experience. They've built years of experience. They know their industry inside out. They're good at what they do. And yet, as I was saying before, they stay in jobs that don't fulfill them. They build up this dread of going to work on a Monday, which as someone who has a business called Moonbeam Monday, I'm so sad about. That's my mission in life, is to help people love Mondays. That somewhere along the way, they've convinced themselves they don't really have any other options. And, you know, when you suggest, like, could there be another option? The response is often like those things I said before: I can't afford to lose my job right now, or it's better the devil you know. You know, I've got to get more qualifications before I move on, or what if I make the move and I don't like it? So that fear is really coming out again. So people are staying in situations, whether this is professional or personal. You know, I myself stayed in a relationship where I was, and I know now that what was driving me to stay there was fear, because I didn't know what else there would be, or if there would be anything else. It was like that, well, at least I know what I'm getting here. And so we become fearful of moving. And I often wonder if part of that comes from being so familiar with what we do that we stop recognizing the value in it. You know, it becomes day to day. So
Yeah.
why is it that, sorry, I know that was a bit of a long ramble and explanation to get to my question, but why do you think that people stop recognizing the value that they actually have?
Yeah, this is a great question, Beck. And look, definitely I see it in business as well, because the shift from a job to being in business really highlights this particular problem as well. And that is, you know, like I spoke about earlier, when, you know, we're a child, and then from 18 months, you know, this masculine is to show us our value and, you know, how we are in the world. Well, when you have a job, there's a beautiful structure that exists in that business. And there's levels of authority, and there's a very clean structure that shows in black and white what your value is. And if you're accepted into this role, then we'll pay you this much money. And if you do these things and, you know, you get along with these people, then it feels like, oh, this feels safe, right? But the problem is that people have often externalized that, or got an external frame of reference of their value and what's okay or not okay. And so those structures hold that. But then when you think about shifting, so maybe going to a different job, there's a whole lot of unknown about, will there be another structure, or will there be another authority that's going to say that this is my value? And it's really interesting, because I always remember, like, back nearly 30 years ago, that sounds crazy, but nearly 30 years ago, I was in my early to mid 20s, and I was working for a bank. And at that time, that bank had just got taken over by another bank. And so there were a lot of redundancies that happened in this takeover. And so a lot of the redundancies happened to women that were sort of in their 40s to 50s, and who worked in the bank for a long time. Yeah. And it wasn't just that because they were women, but because it was in the branches where I were, and that was, you know, predominantly a lot of women that worked in that space. And I remember this particular woman at my branch saying, I can't be made redundant because I can't get a job anywhere else. And I remember thinking at that time, like, I don't ever want to be in a situation thinking that I can't get a job anywhere else. And I remember also thinking, because I was probably a little bit of a cocky 20-something-year-old chick, thinking, like, if you think you can't get a job anywhere else, why do you think you should have this job, right? Because
can you just let that land for the audience?
Yeah.
Can you say that again?
If you get a job anywhere else, why do you think you should have this job? Because it was just crazy in my mind, right? It's like you've got to keep yourself, I was thinking you've got to keep yourself relevant and, that there's some value there. But it does come back to being able to recognize that own value in yourself and really being aware of how you're showing up. What are you contributing? How are you contributing to the results and the outcomes and of wherever you are, because that's ultimately your value. However, if we jump back again to like childhood, if we had a parents, especially in the masculine side, if we were a bit dismissed or not really seen by the masculine especially, that can make us feel like we have less value. And if our role was around helping and we were rewarded for not even rewarded, but accepted for helping and being, kind and agreeable and nice and all those kinds of things, then often we become these the sort of emotional regulator of an environment, but never really appreciated for it or shown how valuable that is. And so then that can turn up to where people feel like, my role is to be a helper or to do all these things, but never really being able to recognize just how valuable your input is into that system. And so then, that can also be where imposter syndrome sits and things like that, where people feel like, they're going to get found out. And so, of course, then trying to convince somebody else that you're going to be of value can feel really threatening as well. And I'm sure there's a whole range of other kind of scenarios that fit within that sort of space, but it ultimately comes back to really being able to integrate our own inner power and authority and safety and and acknowledging our own values so that we know how we can express that and ultimately create that in whichever situation we choose to step into.
That was really powerful. And I remember you said that to me, which is kind of what sprung this whole conversation today, was that woman in the bank who said, I can't be made redundant. I can't get another job somewhere else. And that really hit home. For some reason, it was very powerful when you said that, because I thought, yes, exactly right. Why do you deserve the job that you have, almost, if you can't see the value in what you're doing? But we want to see the value in what we're doing. But what I'm hoping is that people are starting to realize that the value that they do bring, and it is possible to find that elsewhere. If you're not finding the fulfillment in what you're doing, if you are feeling drained, if your energy is low, if you're getting sick all of the time. So again, I'm talking about the surface reasons here, because this is how we often start to move into these questions, into this work, is we start seeing the surface symptoms. We're feeling drained, we've got low energy, we don't want to get up and go to our job, we find little fulfillment, life feels a little bit grey as opposed to nice and colourful, like my beautiful background here today.
Yeah.
This is what we start to feel. And I think that's some of the signs that we're perhaps not valuing ourselves, that there is more available to all of us, whether we have multiple uni degrees or whether we've never had higher education at all. Some of the most incredible, intelligent and successful people in the world never finished high school. So these are just some of the things that I've heard people say, and I wanted to be able to offer a different perspective today, because that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? It's the power of perspective. If we're able to see things from a different way and ask different questions or better questions, we can often get to the crux of the issue and what's really keeping us stuck or what's really holding us back from going down the path that we've always dreamed of. We probably don't even tell people about it because we're fearful of what might come from that. But, this is all about taking little steps as well. And I think a lot of what we've talked about today is we've been talking about moments where people reach crossroads, right? It might be that redundancy, like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? It might be a change in family circumstance, or I want to be at home looking after my children, but I still need to bring in an income, something like that. And interestingly, that's also very closely related to the title of your very first and brand new book, The Turning Point. And so, and I want to talk about that just for a moment. I'm curious, from the outside, it can look like people suddenly decide to change something, whether it be their choice or external circumstances. But I imagine it starts a lot earlier than that. So what is it that you've found actually creates this turning point for people?
As in what actually helps them shift, or what motivates people to find the shift that they need to make?
What helps them shift? Because I think we've talked about a few examples of what motivates them to shift. So what is it that helps them shift?
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely the thing that gets people to shift is that we're always on a journey. This journey of life is ultimately for us to become whole. And because when you're whole and congruent within yourself, which means that you feel safe inside yourself, it means that there's less friction between where you are and where you want to go, that things can move more smoothly, and that comes from being greater having greater self resources, right? Being more fully resourced within yourself. And so that means that you're able to meet your own needs. And so this is really what comes back to, and this is what the turning point is based on, is really helping people to be able to, number one, identify where these friction points come from, where are these incongruencies, or the feeling that I'm not good enough, or that I can't, do what I want or have what I want, or that, often it shows up, really just as people feeling like that there's something underneath that they're hiding, right? That there's some kind of vulnerability that they need to protect in some way. And so, I often talk about, we go from creating complicated solutions to simple problems to evolving to a place where we can create simple solutions to complicated problems. And the thing that is what makes our problem solving complicated is all of the fears and the doubts and the what will people think, and will people reject me, or will I be abandoned, or will I end up with no money, or will I end up alone, whatever that might be. That's all of the things that are running in the background that makes everything complicated. And so once we realize and we reconnect with the truth of who we are, and we can meet our own needs and create that inner safety where, we know I am a good person, that I am fully entitled to have and do what I want because I want to have and do it or be it. Well within the realms of, I also know I'm a moral and ethical person that's not, intentionally causing any harm to anybody else, then that's where we can really step into our own power and authority, and then we can move through life a lot quicker. But the key thing to this is that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know what you don't know. And I'm not here saying that I'm some, fully evolved, enlightened monks sitting on the top of the mountain. I'm far from it. I'm a long way from where I started. And I, can do a lot of really great work with people and all those kinds of things. But I know every time I set a new goal, every time I want to have a new experience in my life, depending how far removed I feel that is from where I am now, it's going to require that there's something else I'm likely going to need to get into alignment with to make that happen. There'll be something else that I might, receive. And I mean, it could even be, an example is I used to have a terrible fear, I would say into the realms of phobia, of public speaking.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate.
Yeah, like I would shake, I would be red. Like I remember even in a job that I had, we had these crazy awards where it was in hospitality. I was working in finance. There were these monthly awards, and one was best team member and one was best groomed.
Oh, okay. That does sound like hospitality. Yeah.
I used to get nominated for this Best Groomed award all the time, and I won it. So my great skill at that time was that I could rock up to work looking nice, so I remember standing in front of people that I knew, because I was in accounts and I'd done payroll and, all of the accounts. I knew everybody, all these people that I knew I'm standing in front of, and I was receiving this piece of paper, and I was shaking just standing in front of people. That's how bad it was. It was,
and in front of people that you knew as well. In front of
people that I knew really well. So it was like was a crippling fear of public humiliation, essentially, what it was. But I resolved that, but it resolved in layers again, right? Because then it was like, oh no, I can stand in front of people that I know. And then it was like, oh, I started going to networking things, and then then I start presenting to networking things, and then then I could start presenting in front of people that I've never met before. Next week I'm presenting in front of a whole bunch of people I don't know. There'll be about 180 people, but if it was 10,000 people, I'd probably still feel there's a fair bit of stuff I would need to resolve.
Okay. Yeah. So increments, and this is why it's important, I think, for people to understand that even though they might set this incredible goal, well, maybe we need to pull it back a bit and go, what's the first step of that?
Yeah.
Let's not set that goal of, I want to be able to stand in front of 10,000 people and deliver a word perfect speech. Let's go with, let me be able to stand in front of 20 of my closest friends or colleagues and accept an award.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, but as we achieve those different levels, you might do whatever the work it is and resolve what it is to get to that level. And then you go, oh, from here, I can see further. So maybe this is my next goal. And then you set that and you go, I haven't done that before. And there might be some other level of stuff that you work through. But, and I think the reason why this is a constant evolution, I've said this for a long time. I used to think about this, like, there was a time I remember, probably 8 years ago or so, crying to my coach going, oh my God, will I ever get rid of all my stuff? The answer is no, in case you're wondering.
Thank you for clarifying that, Coach.
There will be more, but it's just the ease in which you move through it. But, I really believe now it's kind of like, if you think about your nervous system and all the little, neural pathways that go through your whole body, that, who you are right now is made up of how, like I was saying before, the identity and how you believe the world is, and your relationship to everybody in your life and your childhood and your environment and your work and everything like that. If you were to go in and pull out by the core every single thing that was disempowering or not in your full power and total alignment, and just pulled the whole thing out of your nervous system, you would probably collapse in a heap, right? Because you just would not know how to relate to the world around you. And so this is why I really believe it happens in layers, right? We have thresholds of where we're happy to shift things around. And as we do that and we build up that neurology, then we go, yeah, you know what, I could, go a bit further, and I could go a bit further. So, it all depends on how much you're wanting to change your life. If you're completely changing your whole identity and work, going into a business, or change, whole different company, and changing relationship, and moving house and moving country, and every other thing happening at the same time, it's probably going to be a bit full on.
Yeah.
Right?
Start with one thing.
Yeah. Start with one thing and feel safety in that, and then you'll have the basis for the next thing.
So is that if someone listening who has, perhaps they've accepted, or they're just thinking, well, maybe this is just my life now, and they're possibly in their 40s or 50s, which I would say is still actually quite young. I'm about to turn 47, and I don't even believe I'm middle-aged yet. So if there is somebody that is thinking maybe this is just my life, what would you say to them?
Well, does that bring you joy?
Quite a simple question.
Yeah, because something's only a problem if it's a problem. But if you're sitting there and this is my life, and you're like, yeah, I can quite happily, just plod along like this forever, go for it, my friend. You know, there's no one saying that you have to do anything different. But if there's part of you that's saying, you know, niggling away and is using up some amount of your available energy and, you know, bandwidth, and that is causing you some discomfort, then the best way to resolve that, you know, there's a great universal principle called tension seeks resolution. And if there is tension between two, like as soon as you've got 2 points, there's tension, right, between those 2 points. And so if where you are and where you think you want to be are 2 different points, there's going to be some tension. And so the ultimate way to resolve that tension, some people will just keep changing the other point as if that's going to resolve the tension. But ultimately, the way you're going to resolve that tension is by moving closer and closer and closer to that next point. And so, as you do that, you will release the tension and, you know, revert to your higher state of joy or contentment or fulfillment or whatever that is, until which time you choose that there's another point that you want to get to, and you create another set of tension.
Great answer to that question. Thank you so much. And we're going to wind up in a moment. If you're anything like me, I'm a processor. I want to listen back to this over and over again. I feel like I've almost just had a coaching session. So thank you very much for that. I want to listen back and get all of the good stuff out of this. But I want to ask you 5 quick questions in a moment. But before that, I imagine there's some people listening here who are hearing themselves in this conversation now, whether it's that really loud voice going, oh my goodness, she's practically describing me, or it's just that, like, I think you use the word, that slight niggle, and if they're listening to this and thinking that, then I'd love for you to just share who are the kinds of people that you work with, perhaps if they want to get in touch with you, and how do they do that? What have you got on offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So primarily I work with people in business. So a lot of the people I work with are either coaches and practitioners and, you know, well-being practitioners in that space. And I do a lot of business coaching and mentoring. I'm really good at helping people really step up their business and become more aligned with their ideal clients and ultimately create a business that supports them. So that's one of my real passions. My background before I got into coaching and training is accounting and finance. I spent 20 years in that space. So I'm a real numbers brain. I'm a Pisces sun and Pisces moon with Capricorn rising. And a manifesting generator for anyone that makes sense too. So I've got that kind of combination of, you know, really understanding human behavior and emotion, but really grounded in a practical sense as well. So I do a lot of work in that space. I do a lot of work as well with men in business and leadership, especially those in the blue collar sort of space. So in, you know, construction and manufacturing and things like that, which is, you know, a little bit left field, some people think, but they're generally people that can make good money, but they suffer with a bit of stress and anxiety and things like that. And so again, it's more mindset with those, but also looking at what's going on in the structure of their business that's causing the stress and anxiety. And then I work with some small clinics and their teams and the leadership teams of bigger companies as well. And, you know, it can be anything from, to be honest, a lot of the work that I do comes around for people and their communication. So how easily they can communicate their thoughts and ideas and, you know, express themselves in that space. So I know that's probably sounding a bit broad, but
there's a lot of different people you help, I know, but it does come back to the fundamentals and a lot about what you spoke about at the very beginning. And I mean, I can totally attest to how quickly actually when we have the courage to step up and say, yeah, you know, I need some help with this. I'm not quite sure what it is. Like you said at the beginning, there was something a bit sticky there. I couldn't quite put my finger on what it is. You've figured it out. You've even written a book about it. For those looking at the video, it's called The Turning Point. It's available to order on your website, I believe.
Yes.
I 100% recommend getting it, having a read. It will make so much of what you've been talking about today make sense. And then, of course, get in touch with Toni if you'd like to. And I will make sure that all of your links and everything are provided in our show notes. But I think your website, tonieverard.com.
Yep, that's the one.
It's as simple as that.
Pretty easy to find me across all the socials. I'm Toni Everard. I think there's one other Toni Everard on the internet, and it's like a 98-year-old lady in America.
Which is not you. Awesome. Toni, before I let you go today, I want to finish every episode of the podcast with what we call our Brain Changers Fast Five. So just 5 questions to get a simple answer from you. Are you happy to partake?
Yeah, fire away.
Awesome. So one belief that you've changed your mind about.
One belief that I've changed my mind about.
Just one.
Do you know, it's so funny. This must be anchored from NLP training, but the first thing that popped into my mind was that I'm a smoker. I'm not a smoker.
Oh, okay.
There was a time I was a smoker. I'm not a smoker anymore. That's so random. That's what pops up.
Interesting. Yeah, for all you smokers out there, this is linked to the identity question, you know.
If you're smoking now, that's a belief that you want to change, is that you no longer want to believe that you're a smoker. It'll change your life.
All right. What are you curious about right now?
What am I curious about right now? Is first thing that popped to my mind is where can I go on my next private pool villa trip in Bali?
Oh, nice.
I love researching holiday destinations. So we're going to Vietnam at the end of July. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing a bit of research about that. But back in my mind is I could do with a few days in a private pool villa in Bali. So
that sounds nice.
I'm curious about now, how that's going to pop into my life.
And see, I love that it's not all about business for you, like that, but you know, that life and like personal life and business, they are inextricably connected for those of us in business, but you've got to have those things to look forward to, like the private pool villa or the trip to Vietnam, to, you know, be successful in business as well, because it can't all be about the work, can it?
I don't know. I 100% believe that if you have a business, it should work out a better deal than if you're having a job.
Yes, exactly. Otherwise, why would you do it?
Yeah.
All right. What's one habit you wish you'd started earlier?
One habit that I wish I'd started earlier. Look, I don't really ever. I'm not much at looking back. That reminds me of a Tame Impala song. He pulled the mirrors off his Cadillac because he didn't want to make it look like he looked back. Mm-hmm. I don't tend to look back and go, oh, I wish. I always feel like I'm here. But I mean, I guess the first thing that popped into my mind would be like that I was doing weights. Here we go. Yeah, I wish that I'd loved weights more than cardio when I was in.
Okay. Yeah. You were a cardio queen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think any woman in her 40s, 50s or above will understand that. What gives you purpose at this stage of your life?
What gives me purpose is business. I mean, ultimately, and I know that sounds a bit weird, but like I ultimately feel like business is a part of spiritual evolution and personal evolution because of what it requires from you in terms of personal growth. I think that you can still fulfill that in an environment where you have a job, but that will also involve probably sales and marketing and leadership and competition and things like that. But so for me, business and really mastering business and helping other people master business in a way that they can use it as a vehicle to create what they want in their life and ultimately help more people that is what gives me purpose. So when I hear my clients say that they're working with more clients and that the stories of how they've helped people and create that change and how their life's changed and how that's impacting their relationship and their families, that really gives me a sense of I'm here doing something that's, really making a difference.
Doing the good work. And lastly, because this is the Brain Changes, what's one thought that changed your life?
What's one thought that changed my life? What's one thought? Gosh, that's like a needle in a haystack, isn't it? What's one thought that changed my life? I think really the thing that pops to my mind is I can.
Yeah.
It's just that I can. If I'm questioning anything, I can. Yeah,
I love that.
I can do it. I can,
Simple. And as we talk about all the time, our thoughts create our reality. So if we're telling ourselves that we can do something, we're likely to get to be able to do that thing quicker than if I can't, I'm not sure, I don't think I'm, all of that kind of stuff. So that simple change of the language can make a huge impact.
Yeah.
Toni, thank you so much for being on the Brain Changes podcast today. As promised, this has not been a surface level discussion, and I love that about you. Thank you for your time, your wisdom, and sharing all of your stories and being open and vulnerable with us as well. I'm sure our audience will appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for listening to the Brain Changes today. Remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Brain Changes. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation today. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Our mission is to reach as many people as possible to help them revolutionize the way they think so they can change their brain and create profound transformation. Please help us broaden our reach by sharing this episode with someone you know will benefit. And remember to tag us on socials at Moonbeam Monday and leave a review. And remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. We'll catch you next time for another episode of The Brain Changes.